I had spent a few days in Austin visiting friends. I live in Louisiana, so it's sort of an all-day drive. On my last day in Austin, my old friend David had commented on my Instagram story asking when I was leaving, and I said, "Today." He told me he lived an hour outside of Austin, which was actually in the direction of home for me. I hadn't seen David in years, and it would be nice to catch up. He said I should stop by, and I said, "Sure, why not?" I set my GPS for David's address, and it said about an hour-and-a-half drive. David and I had been friends back in high school, but lost touch after graduation. We followed each other on social media, but hadn't really spoken in years. When I pulled up, I noticed his house was a little old-fashioned. It wasn't run down or anything, just aged. A wooden porch creaked under my steps. And when he opened the door, I caught the scent of old wood, and something rustic, like an old cabin in the woods. Tom was, of course, very welcoming, giving me a big hug and pulling me inside. Some friendship stayed, just as pure no matter how much time passes inside the house. Was just as old as the outside. The furniture looked like it had been around since the 70s, and every step I took on the hardwood floors, LED out a small creek. It felt kind of Texas. I guess it was kind of charming in a way, like stepping back in time. We sat down in his living room, catching up on life, drinking whiskey. It was like 5 p.m. By this point, one drink turned into two into three, and before I knew it, I was pretty drunk. The warmth of the alcohol made the room feel smaller, cozier, but also heavier. Hours passed like minutes. Honestly, we were having such a good time catching up that eventually he dropped the question I knew he'd ask. "Hey man, you got a long drive back. Why don't you crash here for the night?" He offered. I hesitated, but he was right. I wasn't in any shape to be on the road. I said, "Yeah, good idea," and asked if I'd take the couch we were on, and then he said, "Nah, I got a spare room. It's nothing fancy, but it's better than the couch." That was good enough for me. We ate some Chinese food that we had delivered, and after a while, he led me down a short hallway to the spare bedroom. I didn't pay much attention to the inside of the room, because I was hammered. We both were, but I remember the air in the room was still like the room hadn't been used in a long time. I barely had time to register my surroundings before I collapsed onto the bed, completely exhausted and drunk. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. My mouth was dry, my head was spinning, and the room was dark except for a little bit of moonlight sneaking into the blinds. That's when I saw in the far corner of the room on the closet door, there was something hanging. At first, it looked like a long black trench coat on a coat rack, but as my eyes adjusted the shape of it, felt wrong. It had a broad upper portion, almost like shoulders, and the way it hung made it look less like fabric and more like a silhouette. My heart pounded in my chest. I didn't remember seeing that when I stumbled into the bed, but I had been drunk. Maybe I just hadn't noticed. I rolled over trying to ignore it. It was just a coat, nothing more. But I couldn't help myself. I peeked again, still there. I squeezed my eyes shut, took a deep breath, and forced myself to sleep. I don't know how long I was out there before I woke up again. It wasn't just discomfort that pulled me from sleep. It was sound of slow, soft creaking, like someone stepping carefully on an old wooden floor. My eyes shot open. The room was dimly lit now, dawn creeping through the blinds. I turned my head toward the corner, and my stomach dropped. The coat was gone. I sat up so fast that my head spun. My body was buzzing with a sickening mix of fear and leftover alcohol. I scanned the room, my heart thewing against my ribs. There was nothing in the corner, just an empty closet door. I threw the covers off and rushed to Tom's room. He was snoring, completely unaware of the panic storming through me. I shook him awake, which took a lot of effort considering he was out from all that alcohol. He finally woke up through the blinds. I turned my head toward the corner, and my stomach dropped. The coat was gone. I sat up so fast that my head spun. My body buzzed with a sickening mix of fear and leftover alcohol. I scanned the room, my heart thudding against my ribs. There was nothing in the corner, just an empty closet door. I threw the covers off and rushed to David's room. He was snoring, completely unaware of the panic storming through me. I shook him awake, which took a lot of effort considering he was out from all that alcohol. He finally woke up to the guest room. I pointed to the exact spot where he was. I said, "David," scratched his head, and asked me if I was sure I wasn't just dreaming. But I said, "I know what I saw." I insisted, my voice shaking a little. I woke up, and he was there. Then I woke up again, and he was gone. I said we stood in the room for a few moments, both of us feeling the same strange silence pressing down on us. Finally, David exhaled and nodded, agreeing that we should check the house in case. We searched every room, every closet, every corner, and nothing. There were no signs of forced entry. No strange coats hanging anywhere, nothing that could explain what I'd seen. Eventually, David tried to convince me that maybe I'd been in a half-dream, seeing things that weren't there. I really wanted to believe it. I didn't want to consider the alternative. Once the sun was fully up, I grabbed my things, said my goodbyes, and hit the road. I felt almost guilty for leaving him alone. After that, throughout the drive back to Louisiana, my mind kept going back to that moment when I'd woken up to that coat-like shape, staring at me from the corner, the way it was just gone in the morning. Maybe Tom played a cruel prank on me, but to this day, he's never admitted to anything, so I doubt that, or maybe just maybe there had been someone in that house watching me sleep, and they decided to leave before the morning. This happened to me when I was 18 years old. I was on a trip with my parents and a friend of mine, whom we can call Lena. This story takes place in Sweden, when we were on a road trip. My parents, Lena, and I were going on a domestic trip, and we had an 8-hour drive from home. The plan was to visit a theme park and stay at a campsite, but we hadn't booked when the day came and we arrived in the city where the theme park was located, but we planned to visit the next day, so we needed a place to sleep. Since we had brought tents in our car, my dad searched online for a nearby campsite. He found one that seemed good and close by, so he called a campsite exit. Unfortunately, that day coincided with a big soccer tournament, and the campsite was fully booked since we hadn't reserved a spot in advance. There was no space left for us. My dad called around, but we couldn't find any campsites that were reasonably priced, and near the theme park, our only option was to find a camping spot in nature. We set the GPS to the nearest parking area in a forest to avoid parking fines. Eventually, we found a spot in a nature reserve. When we arrived, there were some people around, so we asked if it was okay to set up our tents there, and whether it was a good place to stay. A woman who was hiking told us it was a good place to sleep, and that there were no parking attendants. Based on that, we decided to sleep in a small, lonely gravel parking lot. We were surrounded by forest, and a 10-minute walk away was a beach. At first, we considered setting up our tents on the beach, but something told me it would be better to camp in the parking lot. As we got out of the car to set up our shelter for night, I noticed a lone car parked further away in the lot. It looked like it was in bad condition, and there was no one inside. I found it strange, because it was already evening, so there were no more people on the beach or wandering the forest. However, I didn't think much about it at the time. I helped my parents set up our tents. They slept in one tent while Lena and I shared the other. We put the two tents close to each other after putting a lot of effort into building them. We finally finished. Lena and I made our tent comfortable. We watched YouTube and ate snacks during this time. It was around 11 p.m. We wanted to sleep at a decent hour, so we wouldn't be too tired the next day. After a while, around midnight, we decided to sleep. At this point, my parents were already asleep in their tent. Lena and I were scrolling through TikTok when we suddenly heard a metallic sound from the parking lot. It sounded like a shovel being thrown onto gravel. We both jumped in fear and asked each other what could be so scared to peek out of the tent window. We chose to stay silent and listen. The sound came from the same direction as the abandoned car. Then heard what I assumed was a shovel being thrown into the car's trunk, followed by the trunk slamming shut. We sat in silence, our hearts pounding. Then we heard the car speed off, as if someone were trying to get away. Quickly, I texted a friend from a nearby city, telling him where we were staying. He replied, warning me that the beach nearby was known to be dangerous, with organized criminals often engaging in illegal activities there. We had no idea about this before. When I read my friend's message, I felt cold and deeply. About 10 minutes passed in silence after the car drove away. Lena and I were starting to calm down a bit when out of nowhere we heard a very loud and terrifying scream of a man coming from the woods. We were absolutely terrified. I immediately texted my mom and told her we heard a loud scream. When she didn't answer, I called her phone to wake her up. She finally answered and said neither she nor my dad heard anything. She reassured me that it was probably nothing serious, but at that moment I couldn't think of any natural reason for it. Someone is screaming like this, Lena, and I crawled on the blankets, terrified. We don't know what's happening. Every minute felt like an hour, even though it was the middle of the night. We were too scared to sleep. Suddenly, everything went eerily silent, and my blood froze. I heard footsteps. Someone was wandering around our tents, moving stealthily. Lena and I sat frozen with fear. I put my phone down so its light wouldn't illuminate the tent. My heart was beating fast, and I could hear my pulse. There was No logical reason why anyone would be wandering around. Our tent's in the middle of the forest. At this hour, footsteps move around our tent first, then towards my parents' tent, then around our car, which was parked nearby. The person stopped and seemed to be looking at our tents for a moment. There was complete silence. Then I heard the same car from earlier return. Its headlights illuminated our tent and Lena, and I quickly lay down to avoid being seen. I gathered my courage to take a quick look through the small tent window. I saw the car door slam shut. Before it took off again, I felt a brief moment of relief as the person left my view. I could see the route they took. 5 minutes later, I saw another car approaching quickly. It was a police car racing the same direction the other car went. Nothing else happened after that. Lena and I were still in shock, so we decided to sit in the locked car to feel safer. I stayed awake until about 5 a.m., keeping watch over the forest, while Anna eventually fell asleep beside me. After about an hour, we went back to our tent, and out of sheer exhaustion, finally fell asleep. We woke up around 9 a.m. completely drained. I told my mom everything that happened, and she revealed that she had also heard the footsteps, but when the person was near their tent, she had also heard heavy breathing like the kind you hear in horror movies during a scary phone call. She had been terrified too. However, my dad had slept through the whole thing, so we had to tell him the story without hesitation. We immediately packed our things in the tents, eager to leave as soon as possible. None of us wanted to stay there any longer despite the terrifying night. We had a good time at the theme park later that day. However, that evening I decided to research the forest where we had camped. What I found made my stomach drop. Just a short time before our visit, a man had been murdered there, stabbed to death due to gang-related debts. Even more disturbingly, 2 men had gone missing from that exact beach, and he was never found. I couldn't stop thinking about it. What if the person prowling around our tents was a dangerous individual, checking to see if there were any witnesses? What if we were in serious danger? Without even realizing it, I still think about that night, who made that terrifying scream. And why was someone using a shovel in the middle of the night in the woods? And the police, what exactly were they after? I guess I'll never know. No, this is a story that still haunts me when I think about it, even though I was so young when it happened. 6 is around the age where a lot of my childhood memories started to become more clear. I have one sibling. My older brother, Keith, is 2 years older than me. So at the time he was 8. When I was 6, I had a strict bedtime, 8:30. If I didn't abide by it, or our dad caught either of us up past our bedtime, we'd be in serious trouble. Our dad was always strict with us as kids. Honestly, I don't remember if this happened on a school night or not, but I woke up in the middle of the night to Keith shaking me, Emily, and I woke up and shared a large bedroom upstairs. My parents' room was on the first floor of the house. I was confused as to why Emily had woken me up until she whispered to me to be quiet and listen. I did listen and heard what she was talking about. It was our mother's voice calling us downstairs, but it was in a very quiet whisper. I was going to get up to go answer our mother, but my sister told me not to. She said she didn't think it was our mother. I told her to stop trying to scare me. I remember being so angry at him. He told me to come closer and listen. So I got up and went toward the bedroom door. Right outside our bedroom door was the small hall that led to the bathroom and another bedroom where our grandmother slept whenever she slept. Right to the right as you left our bedroom was the stairwell downstairs, which also had a door. I put my ear to the bedroom door and heard the sound more clearly. He said it sounded like our mother calling our names. Emily, Alex. I said, Emily, that's my mother. And he said, no, she's not somehow. I was 6 years old, and like my little brother, I found myself confident enough to open our bedroom door and then listen to the stairwell door. But the sound had stopped now. I whispered to Emily that my mom had moved away. And he said again that wasn't my mom, and I kept telling him to be quiet and that he was scaring me. I opened the stairwell door and pulled it slowly to avoid making noise. And when the door was open enough, I looked to the hole at the bottom of the stairs. It was clear as day, the silhouette of a person, a woman, but right far away. I knew it wasn't our mom. Who was it? She saw me because she said, hello, baby. Come down right away. Closed the door and locked it, then went back to our bedroom and locked the door too. I started crying, and Emily kept saying, I told you we agreed to start screaming as loud as we could at 3 o'clock to wake our parents. So at 3 o'clock, we started stomping on the floor and screaming as loud as we could. It didn't take long until our parents stormed down the stairs and banged on the locked door. At first, our dad was furious about the door being locked, but as soon as we let them, they saw that I had been crying, and we were genuinely disturbed about something they listened to us. My mom was particularly concerned after telling us she was not at the bottom of the stairs, and she was not calling our names. She asked what the woman looked like, but all we could say was we couldn't tell. Meanwhile, I remember our dad running downstairs to, I guess, look around for the woman. After a bit, our mom kissed us goodnight again, and I'm pretty sure she told us to lock the doors, which was at first I was too young to realize it, but it seemed as if our parents knew exactly who it could have been. Emily and I looked out the window when we heard the doorbell, and after a while we saw a police car outside. We wanted to go downstairs, but stayed put. I remember begging our parents to tell us who it was and what had happened, but our parents always said they didn't know. They also said they were proud of us for not going downstairs personally. I think they knew who it was, and for saving my brother and me from any kind of additional trauma, or I'm afraid they never told us, because the last time I saw my parents at dinner, I asked them about it, and they still brushed it off as a random intruder, but that never explained how that woman knew our names. This happened when I was 16, still in high school, and obviously didn't have a car yet. So I was at the mercy of my parents, who would drive me around or just walk me if the place was nearby. It was on a weekend. My friend Ava was hosting some of our friends because her parents weren't home, and my mom was driving me to her. Ava lived near the house, about a 3-minute drive and a 20-minute walk. My mom was single at the time and also liked to go out too, so she told me if she was out late she just had to walk or get a ride home, which meant she was going on a date. Some of our friends were over at Ava's house. Tina, Courtney, and Billy. The 5 of us hung out in her backyard for a few hours until some boys from our school showed up unexpectedly. I mean, Ava didn't tell me she was inviting them, which is why I was upset. This was because one of the boys who showed up was a boy I had an annoying history with, and I really didn't want to see him. Ava thought she was being cute and sneaky by inviting him there against my knowledge, because for some reason she wanted him and I had to work things out. It was just an awkward mess. There were 4 boys and 5 girls, including me, so I eventually decided I wasn't really feeling it. So after a while I left. I'm sure after I left, some of the others started leaving shortly after because it was already late, but I didn't want to be near those boys, and I made sure to tell Ava how mad I was about the text on my way home, and she kept saying, "Oh my God, come back," and I apologized and forgave her, but I still wanted to go home. I walked for about 5 minutes until I slowed down, and I thought I heard footsteps behind me, and when I slowed down I was sure I heard footsteps that weren't mine. I turned around and there was a middle-aged man with a hoodie on and his hands in his jacket pocket. He was smiling and looking at me and said, "How are you?" I said hello and turned around and kept walking. We were in the suburbs and people were walking around. It's unheard of even if it's that late. Another 5 minutes of my walk went by, and every time I looked around, that guy was still behind me at roughly the same distance, maybe a little closer. Every time I looked, it wasn't a straight road home. I had to make several turns on intersecting roads to get to my house, and every turn I made, he was still there. I was texting my friends about it, and then the guy he said, "Behind me, isn't this a beautiful night?" I liked this, whether I replied yes, and that was that I started walking a little faster, but not enough to raise suspicion like this. I'm running away, the man spoke again, and every time he opened his mouth, a little part of me died inside. Like, why was he talking to me? Why was he following me? He asked, "Are you from a neighborhood?" I replied no. I was making my answer short, and firm a man laughed. I started asking all my friends for help to send one of the men to come pick me up. Ironically, the boy who I was trying to avoid was on his way to come get me. I'll just nickname him Brandon, the man behind me, then said something that changed everything. He said, "I'm not going to hurt you. You live by the elementary school, right?" I turned around, and he stopped in his tracks. He was still smiling, but now his smile seemed more disingenuous, more sinister. I screamed, "Leave me alone," and started to run. I heard the man running behind me, catching up to me. At that point, it was my life on the line, so I started screaming bloody murder. I started screaming, "Help me," for everyone in their houses to wake up, and the man dropped his nice guy facade and said, "Shut up, you little." My screams definitely scared him off, Because he obviously didn't want a bunch of witnesses about to come out of their houses, he ran away into the darkness, and I saw some lights in the houses around me turn on. One couple came out of their house, and I explained I almost got kidnapped. I stayed there in front of their house until Brandon arrived to pick me up. He drove me home. It was only like a 1-minute drive. After that, my mom wasn't home. She was out, and she wasn't answering my texts. I didn't want to be alone, so I invited Brandon in to stay the night. I know he was the happiest camper alive, but didn't end there. We were up late just talking and reminiscing about old times when we both heard footsteps circling the house. My room in that house was upstairs facing the backyard. We heard the gate to the backyard opening. My mom would never enter through the backyard, so something was off. I held back from yelling out "Mom," and instead Brandon and I just looked out the window, watching. We didn't hear any more sounds. We were expecting to see someone walking around the yard, but instead we both heard a man's voice say, "I see you up there." I let out a very audible gasp, and I stepped away from the window. Brandon yelled out something along the lines of, "We're calling the cops, you freak." That's exactly what we did. The fact that this man knew where I lived, he probably knew who I was. What if he knew I was? Brandon went to Ava's house and talked a lot on the phone with 911. Looking back, I know he tried really hard to be the man in the situation, and I appreciated that. I was so glad he went in. The cops showed up, and their presence made me feel safer. Even just giving them a description of this guy made me feel better, and like at least something was done. My mom came home a short while later, and she was just as scared as I was. They kept the police car parked on the premises for a few hours as a deterrent. Luckily, I haven't walked at night since then, and I was even afraid to go into our backyard. After that, my mom had to call our uncle to come and install a full security camera system. He made no effort to hide them. They were on full display to deter that creepy guy and any other creeps from coming into that house. I'm glad to say that's where the story ends, because that incident also led my mom to sell that house after just about a year, because she hated seeing me living in constant fear in that house. We never found out who he was. That man was